Anthony Frank Iommi, born the 19th of February 1948, is an English musician. He co-founded the pioneering heavy metal band Black Sabbath and was the band's guitarist, leader and primary composer and sole continuous member for nearly 5 decades. Iommi was ranked number 25 in Rolling Stone magazine's list of the 100 greatest guitarists of all time. Born and raised in Handsworth, Birmingham, Iommi attended Birchfield Road School, where future bandmate Ozzy Osbourne was also a pupil 1 year behind him. At age 8 or 9, while being chased by another boy, Iommi fell and cut his upper lip. As a result, he gained the nickname Scarface, which made him more self-conscious of the scar, so he eventually grew his trademark mustache as a means of covering it. At about age 10, Iommi began working out and learned judo, karate and later boxing as a means of protecting himself from the local gangs which congregated in his neighborhood. He envisioned a future as a bouncer in a nightclub. Iommi initially wanted to play the drums, but due to the excessive noise he chose the guitar instead as a teenager. After being inspired by the likes of Hank Marvin and the Shadows, he has always played guitar left-handed. After completing school, Iommi worked briefly as a plumber and later in a factory manufacturing rings. He stated that at one point he worked in a music store, but quit after being falsely accused of stealing. At the age of 17, Iommi lost the tips of the middle and ring fingers of his right hand in an industrial accident on his last day of work in a sheet metal factory. Iommi described how he was told, "You'll never play again. It was just unbelievable. I sat in the hospital with my hand in this bag and I thought, that's it, I'm finished. But eventually I thought I'm not going to accept that. There must be a way I can play." After the injury, Iommi's factory foreman played him a recording of famous jazz guitarist Django Reinhardt, which encouraged him to continue as a musician. Inspired by Reinhardt's two-fingered guitar playing, Iommi decided to try playing guitar again, though the injury made it quite painful to do so. Although it was an option, Iommi never seriously considered switching hands and learning to play right-handed. He ultimately decided to continue playing left-handed. To do so, he fitted homemade thimbles to his injured fingers to extend and protect them. The thimbles were made from an old fairy liquid bottle, melted it down, got a hot soldering iron and shaped it like a finger and cut sections from a leather jacket to cover his new homemade prosthetic, which created 2 technical problems. First, the thimbles prevented him from feeling the strings, causing a tendency to press down very hard on them. Second, he had difficulty bending strings, leading him to seek light-gauge guitar strings to make it easier to do so. However, Iommi recalls that such strings were not manufactured at the time, so he used banjo strings instead, until around 1970 when Picado Strings began making light-gauge guitar strings. Iommi had played in several blues rock bands, one of the earliest of which was the Rockin' Chevrolets from 1964 to 1965. The band had regular bookings. Iommi later joined the Birds and Bees, and when they were offered work in Germany, Iommi decided to leave his factory job to take up the opportunity. From 1966 to 1967, Iommi played in a band named The Rest. It was in The Rest that Iommi first met future Black Sabbath drummer Bill Ward, who played drums and sang in the band. From January until July 1968, Iommi was guitarist in Mythology, with Ward joining a month later in mid-February. In May 1968, police raided the group's practice flat and found cannabis resin, which resulted in fines for the band members. Most significantly, the incident made it quite difficult for the band to secure future bookings, as most club owners avoided bands they viewed as drug users. Mythology subsequently split up after a gig in Silith on the 13th of July 1968. In August 1968, at the same time as the breakup of Mythology, another Birmingham band called Rare Breed also broke up. Vocalist Ozzy Osbourne joined with Iommi and Ward after the duo responded to an advert in a local music shop proclaiming Ozzy Zig requires gig has own PA. Requiring a bassist, Osbourne mentioned his former Rare Breed bandmate Geezer Butler, who was subsequently hired along with slide guitarist Jimmy Phillips and saxophonist Alan Acker Clark. The 6-piece band were named the Polka Tulk Blues Band. After just 2 gigs, Phillips and Clark were dismissed from the band, which soon after shortened its name to Polka Tulk. In August 1969, after being confused with another group named Earth, the group renamed themselves Black Sabbath. His factory accident affected the Black Sabbath sound. Iommi had detuned his guitar by 1971's Master of Reality album, lowering string tension and easing the pain to his fingertips. Black Sabbath bassist Geezer Butler did the same to match Iommi. Sabbath was among the first bands to detune, and the technique became a mainstay of heavy metal music. Iommi combined blues-like guitar solos and dark, minor key riffing with a revolutionary high gain, heavily distorted tone with his use of power chords, a modified treble boosting effect pedal and a Gibson SG. By the late 1970s, Black Sabbath were experiencing problematic substance use, managerial problems and touring exhaustion. In addition, the band's slow, blues-driven riffs were seen by some as outmoded against the rising generation of metal bands such as Judas Priest and Motörhead. After the albums Technical Ecstasy and Never Say Die were not universally critically well received, Iommi and Butler decided that Sabbath needed a fresh start, so in the summer of 1979, they replaced Osbourne with Ronnie James Dio, the former vocalist for Rainbow. In short, in October 2006 it was reported that Iommi would tour with Ronnie James Dio, Geezer Butler and Bill Ward again, but under the name Heaven and Hell. Later it was announced that Ward had decided not to participate and Vinny Appice was hired as his replacement. Rhino Records released the Dio Years album on 3 April 2007. The album showcased older tracks with Dio and also included 3 brand new songs recorded with Dio and Appice. The band started an American tour in April 2007 with Megadeth and Down as opening acts. The tour finished in November in England with the prospect of an album to follow in 2008. During this period, the band's show at the New York Radio City Music Hall was released as both a live DVD and CD with a vinyl release in the UK in 2008. During the summer of 2008, the band embarked on the Metal Masters Tour along with Judas Priest, Motörhead and Testament. The band's first and only studio album, The Devil You Know, was released on 28 April 2009.